When did the Traitors start?
I started working on Traitors in 2021.
How long does it take to compose music for a show like this?
It depends on what you're doing. So I was just going to watch a bit to get the idea of it and got hooked. That's what I think Studio Lambert do so well about Traitors, and one of the reasons I'm very, very proud to be a small part of the show is that...
Do you get to see Claudia at all? Hey guys, I've got a quick request. Could you subscribe, like, and comment if you like the content we're making? It's really important to support the channel and carry on having great guests like we've had. So subscribe, like, comment. Very important. Thank you. Hi Sam.
Hi.
Welcome on High Points, and thank you for accepting the invite.
Thanks for having me.
Can I ask you to introduce yourself the way you would like to be introduced?
Yeah, I'm Sam Watts. I'm a composer. I work in media mostly, so film and television. I have written music for shows like The Traitors, Sarah Jane Adventures. The first thing I did was a little bit of work on a show called Planet Earth, which people might remember from 8 million years ago. And yeah, so I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, and I love it because I just get to do something different every day, and make a career out of my passion, which is a very lucky and privileged position to be in. So yeah.
I didn't notice that you had composed music for the Planet Earth. Obviously, I've known you through The Traitors that I've watched, and we're going to talk about it later. But yeah, I didn't realise you had done Planet Earth.
That was my first TV gig. So my career started out as I was the music assistant for a phenomenal composer called George Fenton, who did Cry Freedom, Gandhi, Hitch, Planet Earth, The Blue Planet, all of the big natural history documentaries from the BBC back then. The Newsnight theme. He had the BBC News theme for a very long time. So a astounding composer. And I was lucky enough to work for him for about 3 years. And that was my proper introduction to the world of film and television. And we had a very, very comfortable relationship. It was very nice. We both enjoyed it a lot. And one Christmas, George brought me in and said, basically, go away. He was like, you're going to be here for way too long. And I'm going to be very happy with you here. And you're never going to be writing your own music. So off you go, basically, which was terrifying. And I didn't know that he was going to, that was sort of in the December of one year. The following year, he called me sort of in the March and said, oh, I'm working on this little TV show. I don't have time. They're doing a making of section at the end, and I don't have time to write the music. Would you do the music for the making of section for me? So, of course, yes, jumped at the chance. And so that my first ever TV gig was Planet Earth Diaries. So I owe a lot to George, because then my name was on the end of the biggest show that year. Literally, I can't remember. It went to over 100 countries in the world, which is insanely big, like really huge. And that was it. From there, I could kind of point people to a flagship BBC show with my name on it. And that really launched my career.
Are you still doing it?
Documentaries, yes. I haven't done any natural history for a very long time, which is a shame, and I would like to. And if there are any natural history producers listening, please call me. But,
there you go. That's an announcement.
There you go. But yeah, I still do documentary. I really like doing documentary. Natural history is cool, like the cool job, and I'd love to do more, because animals are fascinating, and we're discovering more and more every day. And it's such a cool thing. But I also really like doing the non-natural history documentaries. So I've done a few, and I worked for a little while with a director called Anthony Thomas, who won Peabody Awards and stuff. Like he was a really, really good filmmaker. Sadly, he retired. But we did, I can't remember how many. I did 3 or 4 documentaries with him, and they were all on really, really important subjects. So we did one called For Neda, which was about the 2009 Iranian elections. And there were lots of very peaceful protests, and the government were shooting people in the streets, basically. It wasn't great. And we did a documentary about that, which was really important to tell the story of what was going on in the country. And it was focused around one woman, Neda Aga Sultan, who was probably should give a trigger warning here, was shot and by the government and in the street, and it was caught on phone camera. And some very, very clever people set up a thing called Project Haystack, which was to get the information from Iran out, because of course they'd locked Facebook down, or the internet was locked down, nobody could get, so they used clever technology to ping it around the world so it didn't look like it was coming from Iran. And she became the face of that. And so we did a documentary on that. We did one on corruption and things in the Vatican. That's called Secrets of the Vatican. And we did one on Darwin and sort of took a look at Darwinism versus creationism, which was an interesting one, and trying to stay... The difficulty when you're doing something in a documentary is you have to try and stay very neutral. So we did one called Questioning Darwin, which was basically about how the theory of evolution has sort of been taken on by creationists and twisted and you know, because they don't believe the theory of evolution, they believe that God created the world. And they have like creationist museums where they have a dinosaur, a fossilized dinosaur footprint with a human footprint in the middle, which they use as proof that man and dinosaur were alive at the same time. Okay. Now, that's not my belief. I am married to a scientist. I have a very strong scientific set of principles, and I don't believe that humans and dinosaurs were around on the planet at the same time.
Because it's been scientifically proven.
It's been scientifically proven.
Although, yeah.
But I can't,
I know.
as a filmmaker, as a musician, I can't lambast the creationists. I can't send them up. I can't do music that makes them look foolish or whatever, because that's not the point. If I may not agree with their viewpoint, but when you're making a documentary, you have to give people the information. And that's it. You have to give people the information and let them... Good documentary, I believe, anyway, is giving people the information and letting them ingest it and come up with their own takeaway from it. You don't want to be saying, this is our message and this is what we think as filmmakers and we are doing this. Obviously, you have a responsibility to lay out the facts, but you can't... You have to be very balanced when you're doing that sort of thing.
The BBC is really good at doing this. Obviously, they're the BBC. But you get constantly, especially... I like Netflix, but there's so many documentaries that don't give you all the truth. And therefore you have to... But you take it as granted because it's a documentary, so you feel like there's been a work a journalistic work
Yeah.
that has been as neutral as possible. But then it's not, and there's a lot of documentaries that just show a small angle on the reality and don't show another. Don't widen the angle.
Yeah.
I say this because I'm thinking about Drive to Survive. That I've discovered F1 through Drive to Survive, and I took it for granted. But then, there's YouTube has known that I've been interested in F1 for a while, and realized there was loads of YouTubers who were talking about F1. And realized, oh no, it's not. It's not actually what Drive to Survive tries to say. And then I've got a mate recently who's sent me a documentary about global warming is actually a con, and it's like all the scientists have been trying to make the case for a global warming thing so that they can, because they live from it. And it's like, how do I? Because it's very well done, and if you don't have any of info, it's just fair enough. You take it for granted, and you think it's the absolute truth.
It's a big responsibility when you're making something like that, and as a viewer, you need to take it from a trusted source. And I think there are specific ones that, places that I would go. The BBC, Channel 4, both do very good. Cutting Edge is very good. Dispatches, I've done a Cutting Edge. Dispatches is very good. There are certain filmmakers who I will always trust because I know. But the problem is, you look at Panorama. I've done a Panorama. They're fantastic. But Panorama had a big sort of controversy with the Princess Diana interview because one journalist decided that they really needed that interview. So they used some false information to gain access to the princess and then do an interview. Now, the interview itself had integrity because it was done in a way that, anyway, but access to that interview was not done with integrity, with a journalistic integrity, and that's a problem. And I think people like the BBC work very, very hard. Channel 4, I know, work very, very hard to make sure that it's all got that journalistic integrity. It's well researched. It's ethically done. Phone hacking from the tabloids and stuff, which is not ethical journalism. So that, there is a responsibility. And it's interesting as a composer working on those things, trying to write music that doesn't lead the audience in the direction that you're thinking.
Have you ever had to compose music for a documentary you don't really agree with the approach?
No, I've been very lucky. Through my career, I have been incredibly lucky. I have worked with really talented, brilliant people who are nice to work with. There have been a handful of times when I've worked with people who have been a bit difficult to work with. And I've been mostly lucky enough to choose the jobs that I do. So I will, if somebody approaches me with a project, I will sort of scrutinize it slightly. I will look at it and especially if it's a documentary, I'll talk to them about what it is, what they're trying to say, what they've been doing to make it.
I wanted to start the episode with asking about your background. We've diverged a little bit.
We have, sorry.
But it's a podcast, so it's fine. Can we, first of all, what instruments do you play? And when did you start? And when did you start?
I'm a pianist, so I play piano. I used to play guitar when I was younger. But I was never very good, and my brothers are very good guitarists. So I was always comparing myself to him, and he's 7 years older than me, so he was playing for a lot longer. But I started playing the piano properly, I think, when I was 5. We always had a piano in the house. My nan used to play the piano. My mum played the piano a bit, and there was always an old upright in the corner. And I used to just sit and hit it when I was little. I used to love just making it make a noise. And I think my mum just got really annoyed. And by the time I was 5, it was like, right, you're going and having lessons because I don't want to hear the bashing noises.
I can understand.
Yeah.
Because my kids do the same.
Yep. So yeah, I did that when I was 5. And then when I was about 9, I discovered that I could sing. So I really got into singing. And for a long time, I wanted to be in music. I wanted to be on the West End. I wanted to be in musical theatre.
Actor.
Yeah.
Not a musician.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I wanted to be singing and dancing and, you know, having a gay old time on the stage. But by the time I was sort of 14, 15, I'd realised that was an incredibly difficult career to get into and be successful at. There's a lot of competition. And I probably wasn't really good enough. I could do the singing. I was good enough, but the acting I wasn't. I'm not a brilliant actor. I'm no, you know, I'm no Kate Blanchett. So
we've all got our strengths and our weaknesses, don't we?
Indeed. So at that point, I'd discovered writing music and was really enjoying writing music. So of course, I went for the much easier route with much less competition, I say with heavy irony, of being a composer. So yeah.
I thought there was a lot of competition in composing.
There's loads. I was being sarcastic. It is a very, very...
Oh, sorry, I didn't get the sarcasm.
No, it's fine. It's a very, very competitive industry. But I kind of love the fact that there are a lot of different musical voices out there. You know, there are lots of people who are writing very, very different music, and I actually think there's room for a lot of us because, you know, I write a score in a completely different way to Justine Barker, and Justine writes a score in a completely different way to Hans Zimmer, who writes a completely different score to Rachel Portman, who writes a completely different score to Alex Baranowski, you know, and on and on and on. We all have our own musical voices, and I think that competition and the differences out there push the industry forwards, actually.
So obviously you must be pretty talented to stand out from that crowd.
I don't know whether I stand out from that crowd, but thank you.
How did you start then composing? What sort of, did you go to uni? What training did you go?
I started writing music while I was doing my GCSEs. And I had a very encouraging music teacher, Debbie Walsh, who supported me a lot when I was doing my GCSEs, and she encouraged me to learn more about how to write music. And then I went on and did my A-levels, and my A-level teacher, Chris, was very encouraging, and she kept me writing music. And I went to the University of Nottingham, which I think was number 1 in the country for music at the time. And it wasn't a huge department, but it was a really good department. And I studied composition under Nicholas Sackman and Mervyn Cook. And Nicholas Sackman is a very, very good contemporary composer who writes modern concert hall music. So from him, I learnt lots of orchestration and great techniques of how to use a theme and how to pull it apart and use little snippets and rework it. And Mervyn Cook is basically a walking encyclopedia of film music. He has written some seminal books on film music, and so he taught me a lot of the film and television tropes and the styles and how to write to picture and create moods and that sort of stuff. So I had a really good grounding in composition from them at university. And that's actually how I met George Fenton. He guest lectured at university, and I was that annoying sort of early 20s guy who Mervyn was very, very nice and said to George, I've got this kid who's really keen on film and TV music. Would you talk to him for 10 minutes after the lecture? So we had a quick chat after the lecture, and George was lovely. And then I decided to write my dissertation on the music for The Blue Planet, because I love that score. I think it's some of the most beautiful music ever written, and it just works so brilliantly. So I wrote my dissertation on it, and George was lovely and helped. And I basically prodded him for a year, like while writing my dissertation. Maybe I could come and work for you afterwards. That would be great. That would be really good. And he got so annoyed with me asking that he said, okay, if you get a distinction for your a first class degree, you can come and work for me. Fine. So I knuckled down and I managed to scrape a first at uni.
Well done. Well, obviously, we knew the outcome because
and I phoned, and the results were posted, and the first person I phoned was George, not my mum. I phoned George and was like, I got a first, and he said, oh well, I better see you on the 1st of September then, hadn't I? And then I phoned my mum.
You hear those stories so much, like you just hassle somebody, you stalk on somebody because you admire them, or you admire a company or a place you want to go to, and they don't want to open you their doors. And I've tried it myself. I've insisted with people, but I've never had a positive answer. So what's the success rate of this?
I mean, it depends, and it depends on how that I would say I've had two successful pesterings in my life.
Out of?
Yes, out of. Lots. It's a funny thing. I think there's a fine line between nicely pestering someone and annoyingly pestering someone. When I was younger, I think I was a lot more annoying. But yeah, so, I mean, George was the first person I pestered who, it was successful. Actually, I didn't really pester Russell, but, the second successful one was Russel T Davies, who, I actually wrote in the old days when we used to write things down on this thing called paper. 'Cause I am that old. And I used to send out actual CDs of my showreel. It's all digital now, but and I wrote Russell a letter, basically just saying how awesome he was and how much I liked his television, but in a kind of these are actually just facts, because some of his stuff. I grew up watching Children's Ward when he worked on it. I watched Dark Season when I was a kid, and then he made a show called Queer as Folk, which was just a seminal piece of television, really important for queer culture, but just important for society in general, which really resonated with me. So I wrote to him because his television resonated with me, and I wanted to work with him because he makes great stuff that I love, and what better job would there be? And I was very lucky that he asked me to work on a show called The Sarah Jane Adventures because of that letter.
They must have been really nice on the receiving end, because how many times or how much do we pester people? I'm thinking about marketing generally, but and then how little, because, you know, maybe it's not a good comparison, but I have to do marketing for my company, and they say you've got about a 1 to 2% success rate of answers
Yeah, I think there's a few ways of doing it as well. It depends. If you're nice about it, then people are going to be more receptive to it, I think. I mean, there's not very much point in going to someone when you're a composer, for instance, and saying, hey, I'm a composer and I want to work on your show, because there's 100 people who are going, hey, I'm a composer, I want to work on your show. So you have to market yourself in. I mean, you do have to do marketing as a composer. This is my business. But it's the way you do it. Like I do it if I'm at an event or something. If I'm at, when I lived in the UK, I'd go to the we'd premiere a thing at the BFI, or I'd go to a BAFTA party or whatever it is. You don't walk around the room handing everyone your card going, hey, I'm a composer, use me on your next thing. Hey, I'm a composer. You show them pictures of your dog on your phone and you laugh with them and you talk to them like they're a human being. And I actually try, other than that inevitable, oh, what do you do conversation, where you say, oh, I'm a composer. I try to not talk about work when I'm networking. Because in my experience, people remember the conversation that they had with someone about their cute dog, or that time you were both actually in Brighton at the same time and went on the same, in the same cafe on the same day, whatever. The stupid stories are remembered more than the 50, 60 people they've spoken to who have all been asking them for a job. So I think it's about the way you do it. And I have always been cheeky rather than my style is a bit cheekier. I'm try to be very respectful. I try not to be rude, but I've always been a little bit cheeky. And the people that you want to work with will respond to the way that you do those things, to a degree. So yeah, that's the way I've always done it. Been a little bit cheeky, but
some business advice.
Yeah. Yeah, it might not work. Don't quote me on it, and don't sue me if it doesn't work.
It's what everybody says, and when you think about it, you realize that either you've got something extraordinary that nobody else has, well, not extraordinary, but something that nobody else has, and therefore they're interested in speaking to you or working with you, or you're just a nice person and easygoing, and you're responsive, you're not awkward. I mean, and if you're really good, you could be awkward.
But that's what I'm very awkward. But that's what I try to do. And it was a piece of advice actually given to me by George Fenton. He just said, "Be nice," because nobody's career and nobody's life is linear. It's not. Your career is not a constantly upward trajectory. It's going to wobble around. And you never know who you need on the way down of one of those humps, who you had on the way up, So if I swear a lot, and I'm trying not to swear because I'm on a podcast.
We'll beep it if you do.
But if you're very arrogant because you're on the ascent and you're going to be the best next, you're the best next thing and blah, 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 and you're rude to people, and then you realize, actually, I'm not going to be as big as I thought I was going to be, and nobody's coming to me with jobs, and I need to, go back to these people who I worked with before, or who I refused to work with before because I was too big, but now I can work with them. They're going to remember that you were arrogant and rude, and they're not going to want to work with you. They're not going to try and, why would they help you? Whereas if you're nice to everyone, people are going to be, I had a period of poor mental health, and work didn't really happen, and I wasn't in a good place. And the people who pulled me out of that and helped me get back on track were my friends and the people in the industry who I'd worked with before, who had been nice. You know, we'd been friendly to each other and we got on. I didn't get back on track by going to the people who had been rude to me, because that has happened, and asking them for a job, because I don't want to work with them. A friend of mine, Aaron Dessy, is a film composer, and she's wonderful and full of brilliant knowledge. And I love talking to her and learn from her every time she speaks, pretty much. She told me a little while ago that she really believes that if you put out into the universe what you want to get out of it, it will give it to you. And one of the things that she said she did a few years ago was decide she only wanted to work with nice people. That was it. She was like, my big career goal is to work with nice people. And she said she's been really lucky since she has worked with really nice people. And I think that's a fantastic career goal to have. Just work with nice people.
I want to say it's easier said than done. And I'm talking from experience, where sometimes when you're employed, you don't have choice in who you work with and who gets recruited, who gets above you, who gets below you. And sorry, Sam, it's easy said that you should work with nice people. And, you know, so I'm independent now, and I'm really happy because I can choose who I work with. And a lot of people actually, because it's down to networking, you get on well with somebody, so then you can think you can work with them. So that's the result of being independent, I guess, and working with nicely. But then when you're working for with a big team or a big corporation or whatever, sometimes you're just a number and you don't have the choice. And all those messages try to work with nice people. Well, I can picture myself a few years ago thinking, what is he talking about?
Yeah, and
I can't achieve that.
I think I always say I've been very lucky in my career. I've worked really hard, but I've been very lucky that the majority of the people I've worked with have been lovely. There have been people who haven't, but they're few and far between. And I think the idea of putting it out there that you only want to work with nice people is actually almost a sort of a self-signifier to look for the red flags, to look for the things. So you sort of then start to self-select. Obviously, if you're in a big company or whatever, and you kind of feel like you're just a number, my experience of that is that you find, wherever you are in life and whatever you're doing, you will find your tribe. And I think when you're working, especially if you're working for a difficult company, a company that has like a bad ethos, like a toxic company, there are always two camps in that toxic company. There's the toxic company and the people who are bought into it and are in with upper management or whatever and are perpetuating the toxic company. And there are the rallying against the toxic company lot. And you will find them. And it doesn't make working for that horrible company any easier, because it's a horrible company and it's difficult to work for. But having that camaraderie, that those people who are like, oh, this is just ridiculous, this is awful, who you can talk to, does actually help. And that's the nice people.
Yeah, it sets the standard for kindness in a way. Like, it sets the standard to how you want people to behave with you. If you don't agree with, obviously, again, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, well,
saying you just don't behave or talk to me like this because I don't like it.
It is, and especially if it's somebody superior to you, it can be difficult. You know, as in not literally superior, but work-wise in a higher position or whatever, it can be very difficult. There's an old saying which is, "Treat others how you wish to be treated," And I always used to work to that. I changed it to treat others how they wish to be treated, because there's a big difference. I like people to be kind and nice and all the rest of it, and I think everyone should be, because the world is a much better place if we're all lovely to each other. It just is. But different people have different ideas of how they want to be. You know, there are people who want to be respected and want to be spoken to in a specific way. Now, you might not like that person, but if you show them the respect that they want, the way that they want to be spoken to, if you speak to them like that, they might just talk to you the way you want to be spoken to. They might not, but they might. And I think that if we just spend a second learning who that other human being is and what they need from the interactions that we have with them, it makes things a lot easier. So even if you're working with somebody who's difficult, you know, I can think of, I'm not going to name any names, but I can think of a director who was difficult. And I said yes. I did what they wanted. I didn't actually do what they wanted. I did what I knew was right for the show, but I framed it to them in a way that was what they wanted. And I spoke to them how I worked out they responded best with the kinds of language that they responded best with. And it made them a much happier person because they felt like they were being listened to.
Well, I can say you're very nice because you actually replied to my message of invitation on the podcast. And God knows how many messages I've sent to people, and God knows how many few, do you say that? People replied.
Yeah, and it is. So it's
just very kind.
Well, do you know, you can thank Carol Jarvis for that, because I saw your stuff on Instagram with Carol here, and I've known Carol for a long time. And I thought, well, if Carol's done it, it must be. It must be. He must be nice. It must be fun. So I'll do it.
Did you check? Did you check that with her? Did you send her a message?
I didn't send her a message and say, "Oh, I've been approached by. Was it all right?" I just sort of assumed it would be fine.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's fine. It's okay so far. But yeah, thank you very much. And I always say thank you and big thank you, even, you know, and all of them. But I say it even more now because I know how hard it's a big one. It's hard to get guests on podcasts.
Yeah, and we're all really busy, and you know, everyone has their lives going on and time commitments and all the rest of it. But I really enjoy doing these things. I don't like just sitting in the studio and being sort of shut off from the world.
So you got this first class, and you got a job with George.
Mm-hmm.
What happened next?
I spent time with George in and out of recording studios in London, working on films like Hitch and Bewitched and Mrs. Henderson Presents, which was a lot of fun. Learnt loads from him. And then, as I said, he sort of kicked me out because it was all too comfortable. I did Planet Earth with him, did the diaries section, which was a really steep learning curve because obviously with George, I'd been his assistant, but I hadn't been writing any music. He doesn't use ghostwriting or anything like that. He does it all himself. So,
sorry, how many people work for him? Were working for him at the time?
At that point, there were three of us. There was me, and I was doing music archiving and then session prep and help with the recording sessions and things like that. He had a personal assistant and someone who did the books, accountancy. That was it. Obviously, he would then hire in people like Jeff Alexander to do orchestration and the other parts of the job that go with it. But on staff, there were three of us. It was a little group, and we weren't really. None of us were doing any music writing. So when Planet Earth came about, I had to suddenly put all of the stuff that I'd learned by osmosis and just being around in the recording sessions and watching George write and all of those things into practice. So that was a lot. Luckily, it was not on every, the whole of every episode. And then once that was out and on telly, I wrote to Russel, and Russel was kind enough to let me work on what was at the time going to be a one-off single episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures, because Liz Sladen, who plays Sarah Jane Smith in Doctor Who, had come back into Doctor Who and for an episode called School Reunion, and it just blew up. Like, the response to her was amazing. And in the 80s, they'd tried to do a spin-off called Canine and Company, and it didn't really take off. And Russell was a big fan and loved working with her, so was like, I think we should do a show. And they made this show called The Sarah Jane Adventures, which was made for CBBC, who were a lot of fun to work with on it. And we did 5 series of that show. Russell and Julie Gardner, who are once again in charge of Doctor Who, were in charge of Doctor Who back then as well. And they sent me the script for the one-off that they were doing and asked me to pitch some ideas. So I wrote a couple of ideas for them, and they loved them and asked me to do the show. And then the one-off was so popular that they turned it into a series, and we did 5.
And when did the Traitors start?
Traitors, I started working on Traitors in 2021. The first series in the UK came out in December 21. Yeah, and the first American series was January 22, or is it 22 and 23? No, 22. I don't know what day it is, Mark. I have such a terrible memory.
2024.
Yeah,
Continue.
so it is 2024. So first series of so I started in 2022. December 2022 was the first series for the UK. January 23 was the first series for the US, and then January 24 was the second series for both UK and US.
So it started in the UK.
It actually started in the Netherlands. The parent company is All3 Media, and they own quite a lot of production companies around the world. And one of their production companies made a show called Der Verrader, which is The Traitors. And it was quite popular. And then Studio Lambert saw it, and who were another one of the All3 Media companies, and wanted to sort of make a British version. They pitched a UK version to the BBC and an American version to NBC, and sort of did their own take on it. And so when they came to me, an old friend of mine actually is one of the producers, and it's the first time we've worked together. We'd known each other we used to drink in the same pub in St Albans. We met while we were waiting to order drinks, and she worked for a production company. As I think she was a runner back then, and which is basically the person who has to do everything, get the coffees, pick people up from the train station, do the lot. It's such a hard job being a runner on a show.
Does it actually exist?
Yeah. It's a lot of people I know who are in production started as runners, and it's a really good place to start, because you get to see a lot of the production, and you can, if you're really industrious, you can learn a lot and work your way up the ranks. But in some places it's a sort of a thankless job. In good production companies, they understand, the value of everyone, like Studio Lambert, who are one of the best production companies. This sounds like a bootlicking, but it's not. They are honestly one of the best production companies I've ever worked with. Their ethos is amazing. The diversity in their hiring is equal to the diversity in their casting, in their show. They are just so... They're the kind of forward-thinking production company that I love working for. But yeah, so Abby and I met at a bar in probably 2009, 2010. And got chatting because we the thing where you look at each other accidentally and then very us Brits very embarrassed sort of look away and smile and do the awkward thing. We both sort of did that and said hi and just got chatting while we were waiting for drinks. And yeah, she was a runner for another production company, and we just became friends because we worked in the industry, and she's lovely and we got on really well. And kept saying, one day hopefully we'll work together. One day hopefully we'll work together. Fast forward to end of 2021, I think it was. I get a text message from her saying, I've got this show. Would you be interested? So, 10, 11 years later. And it was the Traitors, and she put me in touch with the rest of the production company. They sent me the original Dutch version, and I was just going to watch a bit. And Claudia Winkleman said exactly the same thing, actually. Just going to watch a little bit to get the idea of it, and got hooked. I watched all of the episodes. I watched the entire first series. I was hooked on it.
Me too. I'll tell you how I heard about it, because there's a discussion around the type of game. But I had to binge watch it. I had to get rid of it because it was so addictive.
Yeah. Yeah. So
even not watching all the full episodes, I had to know what was happening.
Yeah, it is amazing stuff. And the Dutch one was really, really good. And then what Studio Lambert did with it their casting department is amazing. They get such good people on, and there is no script. I mean, Claudia obviously has one when she's doing her bits, I'm sure, but there is no script. Lots of people say, this has got to be scripted. They're not actors. It's just people off the street, and they are really good at picking those people who will have the right kinds of interactions. I don't know how they do it. It's magic. It is absolutely magic. And I can't talk a lot about how the show is made. We like to try and keep as much mystery about how it's made as possible, so that it doesn't ruin it for later series. But they're a brilliant production team. It's very, very cleverly done. And I think there was just something about it, the high camp and the way we dramatized it and went at it with really, really high production values. That's something that really impresses me with Studio Lambert, is the production values on the show. That Squid Game, the challenge, the production values are epic. They are so high, and everyone is working to make the best thing they can possibly make. And it's the same kind of ethos as I have working on the Sarah Jane Adventures and, Tales of the TARDIS, and work with people like Russell and Julie. The ethos is everyone knows what they're doing. Let's make the best television we can possibly make. And everyone just strives to get the best thing. And you're lucky and hit gold sometimes. And I think Traitors certainly did that. They really, really hit gold with that show.
I saw a post on Instagram of you, and I was really happily surprised that it was extremely inclusive and diverse as a series. And I was thinking, obviously it's the BBC. But then when you think more, I don't think you would see something like this in other countries as well, like in France maybe, or maybe because I've not lived in France for 10 years.
I was just going to say, I don't know enough about. I know that the casting for the American one is also very diverse, and there was Andy in the first series, a non-binary person, and they spoke about their experience afterwards, and they said that nobody at all in the cast or crew, and the crew is huge, that like triple digits crew, nobody misgendered them once. And that is because the ethos of the company is inclusive. They want to represent the world as it is. They want to include as many people as they can. That's why you see such diversity in the cast on the Traitors. And it's not a box-ticking exercise. You know, it's not, we must
there was
have
no
someone
selection
from here. We must have someone from here.
There was, this person seems a good cast.
Yeah, this person's...
Take her or him on.
Yeah. You know, I don't know what their thought process was, but, you know, Molly is lovely. Oh, she happens to have a limb difference. And
I didn't notice it until, you know, she made the comment about,
and that's,
you know, on the round table.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the show. That's what I think Studio Lambert do so well about Traitors, and one of the reasons I'm very, very proud to be a small part of the show is that it's not tokenism. They don't do the thing where they front load the show with everyone's tragic stories and differences and all the rest of it. They let the audience get to know the people organically. And when a thing comes up, Johnny, I'm missing a leg. It's just in a conversation. It's, you know, I'm gay, whatever. It's all part of a natural conversation, not a let's make the audience cry about this person's terrible life, you know.
Some people even don't say it. And then after the show, after you watch it, you realize, oh, okay, that's their life, or oh, they're gay. I didn't notice that. I didn't think she or he would be gay, or I didn't realize he or she would have that life. And it's just after interviews that you realize their lives. It made me really so as happy as the environment we are in Manchester, that is extremely diverse, inclusive, socially varied and culturally varied, that I'm very happy that my kids will be able to grow up in that environment, because I know there's still some areas in the UK that are not that diverse. We do speak to some friends who say it's just full of just only white people. And I grew up in an environment that wasn't inclusive. And I'm happy that they will be in that environment.
Yeah, I used to live in Manchester. I love Manchester. It's fantastic city. I think one of the best cities probably in the world. It's a great city, Manchester. Love it. But yeah, it is. I think it is really important, and I think it's really important that we see on television and on film, on the screens, we see the world. Not the world that some people think we should have. We should see the world we do have. And we do have an incredibly diverse world. And life is much better for that. You know, it's much more interesting. I love getting other people's perspectives on things. I find it fascinating working out how someone else's brain works. And experiencing new cultures and, you know, different people's lifestyles and what they do and what they love. So I think the more of that we see on on the screen, the better, because it's truth,
It's so interesting. I mean, we're diverting from massively, but I don't mind, because it's quite important to talk about it. I work in the construction industry, and the construction industry is not the most diverse industries. And when we talk about this, so there was a lot of reports on how diverse in terms of like how many women were working for the companies, what was the balance between men and women. And I thought at the time, it was already done. I thought it was okay. So it's fine if there's not a big. To me, it's fine if there's not a big balance. It's that you shouldn't make any difference between the capabilities of a one man or a woman. It's just accepted, and I think it's accepted by my generation, I would hope. And I thought it's just a redundant thing to look at now. We should more. And there's this report from is it Mackenzie that showed, yes, diversity, male and women diversity is important and increases. They give some numbers to as a bit of a carrot for companies. Like the companies are 10 or 20% more profitable if there's a diversity in sex. But in backgrounds, there's even more profitability, like this 30%. And I think this is what we should look at. But it's very hard. I can also understand that if you've not grown up in a diverse environment, with all the intentions you have, you will be biased.
Well,
in some sorts.
We all have unconscious bias. It's a thing. It's an actual, scientifically proven thing. You can do tests for your unconscious bias. It might be Harvard, I can't remember. But there are tests for unconscious bias. And it's really fascinating because they do them with race. And you have to click buttons, and they will have there'll be white people and black people and people of Asian descent or whatever, and words that are generally positive and negative and things like that. And you do different click the right button or the left button or whatever based on different things, and they swap them all around, and it all changes and everything. You can extrapolate what biases you have from the positive and negative language and the mix of pictures that they're showing you. And I try to be really, really inclusive, and I think it's really important. I'm from a bunch of minority groups, and I have friends in a bunch of minority groups and family in minority groups and all sorts of stuff. And I don't want to perpetuate the stuff that has come before. And I want to move us forwards and be inclusive and things. And I did the unconscious bias thing. And I don't think of myself as racist at all, because I try not to be a racist. And I've got some unconscious racist bias. And it's a really difficult thing to sort of be put up against, no, I'm definitely not racist. I am not racist. And then science is telling you, actually, you are a little bit racist. And you've got to work on that, but you've got to understand that it's social programming. I grew up again in a very white area, and I didn't have very many friends who weren't white. And so my upbringing, although my parents are fantastic and very, very inclusive, they are very inclusive in the bubble in which they are able to be, if you know what I mean. So I think we're slowly breaking all of that down as the generations go on.
So Werewolf is very popular in France, and I've done summer camps with kids, and we organize obviously summer camps for kids. And it's been a game that we kept playing, and we started to play it again with some friends in the UK. And that's when they told me about the Traitors, that we should watch it. And it's just the same game, but it's different names. It's not Traitors, it's werewolves and villagers for the faithfuls.
Right.
But it's no surprise that it's got some success, because the game itself is so successful.
Those kinds of games have been around for a long time. Like, it's basically Wink Murder. I don't know if you played that as a kid, where you all sit in a circle and one of you gets chosen to be the murderer, and you have to wink at people. And if you wink at people, they have to fall down like they've been shot.
Oh yeah, I know that game. Yeah,
and the rest of you have to work out who the one doing the winking is. You know, so they've been around probably for centuries, those sorts of games. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I think the Traitors' success, certainly the UK version, comes from the fact that the people that they've chosen to be traitors have been really good at it, but hated doing it. Like, they've been really, really take Harry from the last one. Fantastic traitor, played an astounding game, really brilliant game.
It's very scary though.
Hated it, absolutely hated it. Everyone who is doing it, you see how hard it is on them, because honestly, they're all really lovely people. And it's really wearing to lie and cheat and betray people like that, even if you've only known them for a few days, because the thing that they're together a lot. They are long filming days and things, so they really get to know each other a lot more than you think, because you don't see it all on screen, you know. So they really do form friendships, and both casts from the first and the second series in the UK still all get together and spend time together and are friends. So the friendships on there are genuine, even though I know that some people criticize it and they're like, you can't become such good friends with people so quickly. But
you live something very strong together.
Yeah. You try being in a house with people for 2 weeks that you don't know and not forming friendships, you know, especially when you're put under stress and have challenges to do and all of the rest of it. And I think that's part of where the success comes from as well, is that there are actual genuine friendships there that we're watching.
Do you get to see them, or do you get to see Claudia at all?
No. I live in Canada, so I am very far from the production, and I'm not really involved in the actual production itself. And no, I don't get to see any of them. If I were in the UK, I'd probably go to a few bits, you know, press launches and stuff like that. But it's a bit far to come from Canada.
It is.
No, but Claudia is very, very lovely, and she was very sweet and mentioned me on her radio show before she stopped doing that on BBC Radio 2. And yeah. Claudia is just adorable. I've had a few little sort of social media interactions with her, and she's always been very, very, very nice. And I think I was really, really touched when she sort of name dropped me on the radio. It was really nice of her to do that, and lots of people wouldn't. I think this is testament to Claude, because lots of people don't really think about the behind the scenes people, the people behind the camera. And I think Claude is so passionate about television and so collaborative in the way she does things, that she's always championing people off screen, which is really, really lovely, because she really understands it takes a huge team to make a TV show. I love Claudia. I love her to bits. She's great.
Yeah, it must have been hard, because she looked and she acted pretty tough doing the show. And as soon as the show is done, she looks so warm and nice.
She's told a story as well on before about the first series, where one of the round tables, and she was just standing, because she's standing off to the side all the time, and she has an earpiece in, and the producers can talk to her, and Sarah, the producer, apparently just said to her, "Watch your breathing," because Claudia was getting really invested in the roundtable discussion, and she was starting to get excited by it. And the producers had to say to her, basically, remember you're impartial here. You've got to say, so it must be, hats off to her. It must be such a hard job. And she does a brilliant job of presenting it. Yeah, she does that fine line between, she's kind of wicked stepmother and everyone's best friend all at once. And I can't imagine anybody doing the British show as well as she does it. I think Alan does an amazing job of the American show, but he does it in a very different way. He's very detached from them. He doesn't get sort of attached to the cast on screen. And I think that works very well for the American version.
How long does it take to compose music for a show like this? If you're able to talk about it, like I presume it's composed.
It depends
record.
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing. So again, I can't talk about really the specifics of how we do Traitors, but I can generalize and talk about how you go about doing it. So some shows you'll not get any footage, and you just get a brief, and they want music that they can cut around and put in places. So that's one way that you might do it. The other way is that you get the footage and you write to the footage. How long it takes is basically how long is a piece of string. It depends on what they're doing. So the first series of Traitors was quite a few months of working with the team, trying to not give any specifics, but that's because the music on that show is gigantic. The largest piece of music I wrote for them was 120 tracks of audio. There's a lot going on.
I thought there was just the one on the on Spotify for the album on Spotify.
Oh yeah, but so sorry. So what I mean is, in an individual queue, there were 120 instances of audio, different instances of audio.
Okay.
So it's a really big piece of music. I've written stuff before that's been very, very small and doesn't take too long. When I was doing the Sarah Jane Adventures, for instance, we were doing an episode a week. So a 25-minute episode, and I was generally writing between 20 and 23 minutes of music, and I had to do that written, recorded, and delivered, mixed, everything in 5 days. Sometimes I'll be on a show and I have to write a minute and a half of music a day. Most of the time you're looking at somewhere around 3 minutes of music a day, which is a lot, and takes a lot of practice to get to. And you're not always happy with everything because you can't spend all the time that you would. But you're always trying to get it as good as you can. Sometimes you're very, very lucky. I did a film many years ago with a friend of mine actually 2 friends, one writer, one director, and I had 7 weeks to write 40 minutes of music, which is the most time I've ever had in my life to write something for a project. It was loads of time and it was really good fun. And I experimented a lot with a friend of mine called Peter Gregson, who's a fantastic cellist and composer. And that was a lot of fun because there was time to play around.
And what's the process of it? Obviously, you just compose yourself, then you record with musicians, and how quickly can that be done?
I'm very collaborative in the way that I work. So I will write and then send it back to the production and get them to watch it and listen and give feedback. Because at the end of the day, we're all working on the show, not just me. So I will give them what I think is the right thing for the music, and then give my clients the opportunity to say, well, we love this, we don't like that, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, and make some changes so that everyone is happy with the finished product. So that can take a little bit more time. But if everyone knows what the deadlines are, everyone tends to be really quick, which is great. So yeah, we'll do a bit of back and forth and make sure we get the music right. And then a lot of the time there aren't the budgets to record with musicians, which is sad. And I think that production companies need to up their music budgets a lot, so that we can record with musicians more, because they bring so much to a score. But that's another conversation. So if you're not recording with the musicians, you do it all in the computer, which still takes a long time because you have to do lots of programming to get it as realistic as possible. And then I send it off to get mixed. I don't do my own mixing because I think a fresh set of ears is very good. So my brother does most of my mixing. So it gets mixed and then gets delivered. So, that it takes as long as it takes. But actually, more accurately, it takes as long as you've got. But you can record, if you're recording with musicians, you can record 20 minutes of music in a 3-hour session. That's the rule. So you'll go into a recording studio, and however many blocks of 20 minutes you've got is however many sessions you need across however many days.
Where do you go? I presume you still do it sometimes.
Yeah. So
and where do you? And you attend those recordings as well?
Yes. Yeah. Oh gosh, can't have music played by real musicians and not attend. Yeah. So mostly before it closed and reopened, I used to use Angel Studios in London a lot. And on Wizards vs. Aliens, we recorded with the BBC National Orchestra of Wales at their home, Hodnett Hall in Cardiff.
Which is a brilliant one. We went there.
Love Hodnett Hall. It's a beautiful concert hall, great recording venue. The BBC National Orchestra of Wales are fantastic. Honestly, I love working with them. They're so fun. They're just such a lovely bunch of people. And I remember doing the first series of Wizards, and I conducted because I was like, I've got to do it. There's 78 musicians. This is crazy. And I conducted, and I nearly fell off the back of the podium because we recorded the title music for Wizards vs. Aliens, and it's really big, and they're going for, and I was like, just go for it, guys. And I nearly fell off the back of the podium because I was just like, wow, this is such a big sound. It's so loud when you're standing right in front of them. And there is nothing like it. It's thrilling. Yeah, there's nothing like live musicians. It's just, you can write a really mediocre piece of music and they will make it sound great. There's just something about a bunch of people putting all of their human emotion and their passion and their hours and hours of practice into your music. It's glorious. I would love to be able to do it more. It's just the best.
What's the budget to record a film music? Are you able to communicate it?
I mean, it depends.
Like a day or a recording studio?
It depends on where you go and how many players you've got and all the rest of it. You can record in Eastern European countries in places like Prague and Bucharest and things like that, and it's not hugely expensive. You can do sessions, I think, for around about £4,000 with a decent sized orchestra. If you want to do the same in London, it might be £25,000. There are some fantastic orchestras popping up and doing work like the Northern Film Orchestra, who actually have tried very hard to make it clear and, very transparent. And they do packages, and their packages have varying numbers of players, and everything is included. And, I can't remember what they are, but they range from something like £5,000 to £15,000 for if you're looking at something like Lord of the Rings, the trilogy on Lord of the Rings the music costs something like £3.5–4 million to record, because there's so much of it and so many different types of players, and
Hey, who composed Lord of the Rings music?
The Lord of the Rings trilogy was Howard Shore.
Okay.
Great scores, really epic stuff. But that's because there were huge orchestras, choirs, soloists of unusual instruments, all sorts of stuff, and they did recording sessions over years, for those films. But that is an unheard of music budget. That's it can be from 4,000 to 3.5 million. It depends on what you're doing.
Yeah. I want to talk about venues, but I also it's more, you don't have to give any figures. It's more to know for somebody who's listening to us and wants to do your job. Does it pay well? Or how? Yeah.
Again,
can you make a living out of it?
You can make a living out of it, and it depends on the kind of stuff that you're doing, and how good you are at negotiating, and how strongly you hold on to your rights. There are some not great practices being done, and it used to be that the what we call the back end, so royalties and stuff like that, were great, and so you could afford to take a lower fee to do the actual composing, because the money that you would get later on from DVD sales and it being shown on television and all of those sorts of things would bolster that. Those are getting smaller and smaller, and being taken away, and music copyright is very, very complicated, but it's basically split into two halves. There's sort of like the writer's half and the publisher's half, and they both actually technically belong to the composer, but you can assign them. So I have a publisher. I'm published by a company called Wise Music, which is the biggest independent publisher in the world. I've got people like Philip Glass and Ludovico Einaudi. So I'm in very, very good company. And so I have assigned my publishing to them. So they do a lot of the administrative stuff for me, but they take a percentage to do that administration. Yeah. But it just means that I don't have to worry about the fact that it's being done correctly. And so that was my choice. Production companies are more and more demanding all of the publishing, which is fine, but the commission fees aren't really going up to compensate for us losing that. And we're at a point where we have to have some very important conversations about the fact that the assumption that a production company can take the publishing is actually the wrong assumption, because it does belong to us as the creatives of the music, as the creators of the music. But the law isn't as robust as it should be to protect us from that. So there are great organizations like the Ivors Academy who are trying to educate and change policy and do things that will benefit us. Like, I'm perfectly happy to split publishing with people. Fine. If that's a thing, I'm perfectly happy to split publishing with people. The thing that is difficult to deal with is when production companies come in and it's just an assumption that they will have the publishing. And it's because they discovered that there is this money that is involved somewhere later on that they can also have, which is fine because they're fronting the money to make the TV show or the film or the whatever. But there's plenty of it for us to share and to keep us afloat. And I will say, I still think it's profitable. You have to diversify more than when I started 20 years ago. So I do something called writing production music, library music. It was called Production Music Libraries. They are now called, which is basically, I'll write an album, send it to the production music library company, and they sync it out. So they will sell that piece of music for a much, much reduced rate to as many people as will buy it and put it on their TV shows or films or whatever as possible. And then I make money from that. And that's one way I've tried to bolster the income, I also teach because that's another thing I love, but also helps. And I think people have this impression of, because they see people, all the big Hollywood composers, the big names, with lots and lots of money, they've worked very, very hard and created this very successful brand. And that's really what they are. They're a brand. Everyone assumes that we're all millionaires making loads and loads of money. And there's this really, really annoying thing going around on Instagram of this creator has put their favorite side hustle is releasing tracks on Spotify and making $3,000 a month. Well, I can tell you, you don't just release a track on Spotify and make $3,000 a month. Spotify don't pay well. They do not pay well. None of the streaming platforms pay well. It's very hard to make money on them unless you're Beyonce, Yeah. There is a reason some people took their music off of Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, all of them, because they weren't seeing enough, and the models don't work. They work very, very well for the CEOs of those companies. They don't work very well for the people who are putting the music out on them. So this idea that we're all, bathing in champagne and have 17 Maseratis on the drive is not actually accurate. Sadly, so yeah, it can be difficult. I don't know how to do anything else, basically. And I love it. And I really love it. And I think if you are sensible about how you approach it, you can definitely make a living. And one really important thing is, I think you have to work out what your definition of success is, because success is a really toxic idea, because we're never asked what we think success is. We're always told what success is. Success is Elon Musk. Well, I don't want to be Elon Musk. I have no interest in being Elon Musk. My idea of success is being able to pay the bills from doing what I love doing. And I'm very lucky I can just about pay the bills from doing what I love doing, And it fluctuates a lot, and you have to be very sensible about putting money aside and doing all of those things, because feast and famine. That's kind of how the industry works.
I would like to talk a bit about venues. What are your usual, I'd say, recording studios? Is the easiest your go-to studio that you've got really great experience from?
Well, like I say, I used to use Angel. I loved Angel Studios. I loved Air in London.
Why?
It's an old church and it's just beautiful. It's just such a beautiful place. And the big hall, the Lyndhurst Hall, has just got such a beautiful acoustic. And when you get a lot of players in there, all going hell for leather, it's just a wonderful sound. And they're nice people, which is good. But I've been in recording sessions in all of the major studios in London, and they're all really great. They're all really nice. I did really like Hodnett Hall. Hodnett Hall is beautiful. Again, lovely acoustic, lovely people to work with, which, as we keep saying, is a really, really important part of it. Hugh, the mix engineer at the time, we just had so much fun recording that music. And that's how it should be. It should be a joyful experience. Even if you are stressed and watching the clock and can we fit another take in? I'm not sure we can fit another take in. It should be enjoyable. And places like Hodnett Hall do that. But there are loads of really good recording studios. I recorded some albums in it's not there anymore again, but in the Tile Yard, there was a little recording studio in the Tile Yard in sort of King's Cross area in London. And I did 2 albums there, tiny little room, and that was lovely. And I got my mate Joe Rubel, who is a great mix engineer and a producer and does all sorts of stuff. He mixed Ed Sheeran stuff, and really talented guy, lovely guy. And he engineered and mixed those 2 albums. Yeah, it just keeps coming back to the nice people for me. You know, if you enjoy working with the people, it kind of doesn't matter where you're working in a way.
How about places in Canada? Do you ever record?
I haven't done any recording in Canada. I've only lived here for not quite 3 years.
Are you able to say why? Is it for personal reasons or professional reasons?
Mostly because all of my clients are UK based, pretty much still. And in the 3 years that I've been here, I haven't had a gig that has paid for live musicians. So I haven't had the chance to yet.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to have to stop it now. It's been an hour and 15 minutes.
I know, I could talk to you forever.
But yeah, thank you very much. How can we follow you? Obviously, you've got websites that we will share.
Yeah, you can find my website. I am most active on Instagram, and I've got such a great name. I've really thought it through. I_is_Sam on Instagram. And yeah, just samwatts.com.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.